A soft click echoed in the lavish yet tense space of the master bedroom. It was the sound of the main door locking, a dry, soulless sound that signaled the beginning of a marriage. Not the beginning of love or happiness, but the beginning of an agreement, a cold transaction between two powerful business empires. Edward looked up from the glass of strong liquor he was swirling gently in his hand. The amber liquid shimmered under the crystal chandelier, reflecting the artificial sparkle of the life he was bound to. Before him, across a vast, awkward expanse, stood Milana. His wife, a woman he had never truly spoken to, only seen in the photographs, sent along with the marriage contract. And now, on their wedding night, she stood there a mysterious silhouette behind a thick veil. The exquisite black lace mask concealed her entire face, revealing only her eyes. Those eyes, even hidden, exuded a strangely calm demeanor, mixed with a hint of sorrow that Edward couldn't decipher. Edward's lips curved slightly, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Marriage, a farce. He, Edward Vance, heir to the illustrious Vance Corporation known for his multi-million-dollar deals and his unrestrained wild lifestyle, was now being sold off like a commodity. In exchange for what a strategic partnership between Vance and the Volkov family, an underground force on the rise, his father had said this was a necessary step to consolidate their position, expand their market, and crush their rivals. Love, happiness. Such luxuries had no place in the world of empire builders, Milana Volkov. The name sounded as if it were plucked from distant legends. She came from a mysterious family operating in spheres that clean upper-class families like the Vances usually avoided: money, power, and chilling rumors. And Milana, the new bride, was even more enigmatic with her ever-present veil. "Aren't you going to take it off, Miss Volkov?" Edward spoke, his voice laced with a hint of mockery. He stepped closer, trying to get a better look at the concealed face, prejudiced judgment. From the moment Milana appeared in high society, whispers had surrounded her. Is she hiding because she's ugly? Or is she concealing some secret? Who is she beneath that mysterious veil? These questions echoed at parties and social gatherings, and now they swirled in Edward's mind. Milana stirred slightly, her lace veil swaying gently. She didn't reply. Her silence only irritated Edward further. He was accustomed to admiration, to being pursued to flattery. This indifference, this mystery made him feel a loss of control. "We are married now," Edward continued, trying to maintain a calm tone. "This game of hide-and-seek is no longer necessary." Milana remained silent. She slowly raised her hand, her slender fingers covered by black lace gloves touching the edge of the veil. Edward held his breath. What would he see? A terrible scar, a deformed face, or a beauty that would strike him speechless? But Milana didn't remove the veil. Instead, she gently grasped a corner of the fabric, clenching it in her hand. Her eyes met Edward's directly, and for the first time, Edward saw determination in their depths. Mr. Vance Milana's voice was soft, warm, like the sound of a stream flowing over stones. "We are married because of an agreement, a family obligation. This face is not part of that agreement." Edward froze. The unexpected frankness caught him off guard. She didn't shy away from the harsh truth of this marriage. She didn't pretend to have feelings or romantic notions. She simply stated her boundary. "Family obligation," Edward repeated, tasting the words like bitter wine. "Indeed, obligation. And what is the obligation of a wife, Miss Volkov?" Milana maintained her steady gaze, to abide by the agreement, to uphold the family's reputation, and to fulfill the assigned role. "Assigned role," Edward chuckled dryly. "Sounds like we're performing in a play. Life is a stage, Mr. Vance," Milana replied, her voice devoid of expression. "And we are all actors, aren't we?" Her words were like a knife thrust through Edward's arrogant facade. He had never thought of his life that way. A play, so everything he did, everything he pursued, was just an act. He stared at Milana, at the mysterious figure behind the veil. This woman, married off to him as a bargaining chip, offered a cold and brutal perspective on their world. "So what role will you play in this drama, Miss Volkov?" Edward asked, his voice deepening. Milana tilted her head slightly. "The role that you and your family desire, Mr. Vance. A wife, a symbol. A part of the agreement. Is that all? What more do you expect?" Edward was silent. He didn't know what he expected. He had never truly thought about this marriage seriously. It was just a move on his father's chessboard of power. But looking at Milana standing there calm and mysterious, he felt a surge of curiosity. Who was the woman behind this veil? What did she truly think? What was she hiding? I at least expect to see my wife's face, Edward said, the sarcasm replaced by a hint of challenge. Milana didn't respond immediately. She turned slowly, walking towards the large window overlooking the vast Vance estate gardens. The faint moonlight shone down, highlighting her slender silhouette beneath the opulent wedding dress. There are things that should remain hidden. Mr. Vance, Milana said, her voice distant, especially in our world, and your face is one of them. She nodded lightly. It's more complicated than you think. Milana's evasiveness only intensified Edward's intrigue. He walked closer to her, the distance between them gradually shrinking. The initial awkwardness was gone, replaced by a charged tension, something he couldn't quite name. Then make me understand, Edward said, standing behind her close enough to feel her presence. Milana turned back, her eyes sparkling under the moonlight like two mysterious black gems. Are you sure you want to understand, Mr. Vance? The truth is sometimes hard to accept. I'm not afraid of the truth, Edward replied, although a slight unease stirred within him. This woman, with her stillness and mystery, was stirring emotions he had never experienced. Then be prepared, Milana said, her voice a whisper. This marriage is not just a business agreement. It is a struggle, an underground war. And you are right in the eye of the storm. Edward frowned. What do you mean? The Volkov family is not as simple as the newspapers portray. Mr. Vance, Milana continued, her voice carrying a warning. And my presence here is not merely to solidify an alliance. The air in the room grew heavier. The sound of the night wind blew through the window frame, bringing with it coldness and anxiety. Edward looked at Milana, at her mysterious figure, and realized that this marriage, which seemed like a soulless arrangement, held far deeper dangers and secrets than he had ever imagined. Who was the real Milana Volkov? Why did she hide her face? And what was the underground war she spoke of? These questions gnawed at Edward's mind, shattering his arrogance and indifference. He was no longer the carefree playboy who only knew how to indulge. He had been thrust into a dangerous game and his mysterious wife. Milana seemed to hold the most crucial cards. Explain more clearly, Milana, Edward said, calling her by her first name for the first time, dropping the formality. Milana was silent for a long moment, as if contemplating. Finally, she sighed, a soft sound that dissolved into the night air. It's a long story, Mr. Vance, she said, and tonight is not the time to tell it. She turned back to the window, her back straight, like an impenetrable wall. Edward stood there looking at the solitary figure of his wife, feeling a strange urge to pull back the veil to see the truth behind it. But something, a reluctant respect or a vague fear, stopped him. Their wedding night, which should have been a night of intimacy and harmony, turned into a tense and mysterious dialogue. Edward knew his life had completely changed. He was no longer the Edward Vance of yesterday. He had become the husband of Milana Volkov, a mysterious woman, a part of a dangerous agreement, and perhaps the only one who knew the truth about what was truly happening. The grandfather clock in the main hall chimed, striking midnight. Darkness enveloped the Vance mansion, concealing the secrets and schemes that lurked within. Edward looked at Milana, and in that moment, he felt something beyond curiosity or unease. A strange connection, an invisible thread binding him to this mysterious woman. Even though their marriage was arranged, built on the foundation of interest and obligation, perhaps it would lead them down a path neither of them could have anticipated. Milana still stood by the window, silent. Edward said nothing more. Both were lost in their own thoughts, in a space filled with unanswered questions. Their marriage had begun, not with a passionate kiss, but with a mysterious silence and cryptic words about an uncertain future. And beneath Milana's veil, perhaps lay the key to it all. Milana's stillness was not emptiness, but a deep ocean. Edward soon realized this. The days following their wedding night passed in an uncomfortable awkwardness. The vast Vance mansion became a theater where Edward and Milana played the roles of a powerful, perfect couple in front of everyone, yet remained strangers full of mystery. Once the doors closed, Edward continued his life, engaging in multi-million-dollar deals, managing the corporation. But his mind was constantly haunted by Milana's image and her veil. The whispers in high society persisted, even growing sharper. Milana became the focus of curiosity and judgment. Who is she? No one knows her real face. There must be a reason to hide. Some terrible secret. The Volkovs are truly strange, marrying off their daughter as if sending a mysterious package. These rumors reached Edward's ears, initially annoying him. He didn't want to be associated with baseless gossip. But gradually that annoyance turned into a desire to understand. He began to observe Milana more closely. At mandatory social events during meetings with partners, Milana was always by his side, silent and graceful. Despite being veiled, she exuded a unique aura, a calmness and self-possession that drew attention. Once during a reception for a foreign delegation, a partner deliberately posed a difficult question related to international law and complex trade agreements. Edward was about to answer when Milana, who had been silent until then, softly spoke up. Her deep, clear voice resonated, offering a sharp analysis, solid arguments, and profound knowledge that surprised everyone in the room. Edward stared at her, astonished. He had no idea she possessed such extensive knowledge. "Miss Volkov is absolutely correct," the foreign partner exclaimed, looking at Milana with eyes full of respect. "The analysis of Clause 3.1.2 of Agreement X is truly invaluable. Thank you." Edward felt a pang of embarrassment. He, who had always prided himself on his intellect and capabilities, was outdone by his wife, so effortlessly right in front of important partners. After the meeting, Edward sought out Milana. She was standing alone by the window, gazing out at the night garden. You know a lot about international law?" Edward asked, still surprised. Milana turned her eyes, sparkling mysteriously behind the veil. "The Volkov family has many overseas operations, Mr. Vance. Understanding international law is necessary." "Why didn't you tell me?" "You didn't ask," Milana replied simply. Edward fell silent. She was right. He hadn't asked. He had been too preoccupied with his prejudices, with seeing her as merely a part of the agreement, without bothering to care about her true self. From that moment on, Edward's attitude began to change. He no longer saw Milana as an ornament or a symbol of an alliance. He began to see her as an independent individual, a woman with her own intellect and abilities. He started to consult her on some business matters, initially just casual questions, then gradually becoming more serious. And each time, Milana offered insightful analyses and fresh perspectives that made Edward think. Once a crucial project of the Vance Corporation reached a deadlock, Edward and his team of advisors had tried everything, but couldn't find a solution. During a quiet dinner for just the two of them, Edward absent-mindedly mentioned the problem. Milana listened attentively, though she said nothing. The next morning, Edward found a stack of documents on his desk. It was a detailed analysis of the project, highlighting weaknesses, potential risks, and proposing a completely new direction. The analysis was incredibly sharp and comprehensive. Astonishing. "Edward." At the bottom of the document, there was only a simple signature, MV. Edward found Milana. Is this yours?" Milana nodded lightly. "I hope it's useful." "Useful?" Edward laughed. "It's what we've been searching for all this time." How did you manage to do this?" "I just thought about it a little," Milana said softly. Edward looked at her, admiration clearly visible in his eyes for the first time. Behind that mysterious veil was not just a silent woman, but an extraordinary mind. Edward's arrogance gradually melted away, replaced by a growing, deep respect. Time passed, and Edward and Milana spent more time talking. Not the awkward conversations of the beginning, but discussions about business society art. Edward discovered that Milana had a rich soul and a profound perspective on the world. She was not only intelligent, but also possessed a kind heart and a strong will. The rumors about Milana were still there, but Edward no longer cared. He had seen a part of her true self, and that was more important than any gossip. He began to protect her instinctively. When someone deliberately spoke ill of or mocked Milana in front of him, Edward would respond coldly and sharply, silencing them. One evening at a charity gala, a female guest deliberately approached Edward and insinuated about Milana's peculiarity. "Edward, does your wife always wear a veil like that? It's really so strange." Edward turned to look at her, his gaze icy. "Elegance is not about showing off, Miss Jones, and I find my wife's mystery far more captivating than empty ostentation." The guest's face paled, and she didn't dare say another word. Edward turned back to look at Milana, who was still standing beside him, silent, although she didn't speak. Edward knew she had heard everything. He reached out and gently touched her gloved hand. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. Milana squeezed his hand gently. "I'm all right, Edward. It was the first time she had called him by his name, so naturally Edward felt his heart skip a beat. It was no longer an obligation. It was no longer an agreement. A new feeling was blossoming within him, a feeling he had never experienced: concern, protectiveness, and perhaps love. Edward realized that his growth wasn't just in business or power, but in the way he saw people. Milana, the wife he had never wanted, had taught him a lesson about depth, about a person's true worth, not lying in their appearance or in rumors. He had learned to look through the facade, through prejudice, to see the hidden gem within. He still hadn't seen Milana's face, and she still hadn't revealed the secret behind the veil. But that no longer mattered as much as before. Edward knew that no matter what her face looked like, Milana was still the intelligent, resilient, and mysterious woman he was slowly falling in love with. One evening, when they were alone in the mansion's vast library, Edward gathered the courage to ask Milana about the veil again. "Milana," he said, his voice softer than ever, Can I know why you always wear it?" Milana sat across from him in the dim light, her figure even more mysterious. She was silent for a long moment, as if considering her words. Edward waited patiently, not urging her. He knew this was an important moment. Finally, Milana sighed softly. "Edward," she began, her voice a whisper, as if sharing a secret meant only for the two of them. "This veil. It's not just to hide." Edward watched her intently, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew Milana was about to reveal a part of the truth, and he was ready to listen. This arranged marriage, which began with a cold agreement, was slowly leading them to a world full of mystery, where genuine feelings were blossoming amidst obligations and prejudices, and Edward, once arrogant and indifferent, was now ready to face anything as long as he could be with Milana. The story of Milana Volkov and Edward Vance, of their arranged marriage and the secrets behind the veil, had just begun, and their journey from strangeness to love, from prejudice to understanding, promised to be filled with many more twists and surprises ahead. Edward looked at Milana, his eyes filled with tenderness. He knew that no matter what she was hiding, he would face it with her, because for the first time in his life, he had found something that money and power couldn't buy: a real connection. The library was silent, save for the soft hum of the antique clock in the hall and the barely audible sound of their breathing. Edward waited, his gaze fixed on Milana, a mixture of anticipation and trepidation in his eyes. He had seen glimpses of her intellect and strength, but the veil remained a barrier, a symbol of the secrets she held close. Milana finally broke the silence, her voice still a low murmur. "The veil, Edward, is a shield, not just from the prying eyes of others, but from things far more dangerous than gossip." She paused, and Edward sensed a deeper layer of meaning beneath her words. "Dangerous." He echoed, his curiosity piqued. "Our world, the world of our families, is built on power, Edward, and power attracts many things: admiration, envy, but also danger, threats. The Volkovs, we have our share of enemies, those who would exploit any weakness." Edward leaned forward, intrigued. "And your face is seen as a weakness." Milana was silent for a moment, then gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "In a world where appearances can be manipulated, where identities can be stolen or used as leverage, anonymity can be a form of protection. My father believed it was the best way to keep me safe, to keep the family safe." Edward absorbed her words, a new understanding dawning on him. The veil wasn't about hiding a flaw. It was a strategic defense. It was a testament to the perilous world they inhabited, a world he was a part of, but had never fully comprehended until now. "And the underground war you mentioned." He pressed gently. Milana's eyes, visible through the lace, seemed to darken slightly. "The alliance between our families, while presented as a simple business merger, is more than that. It's a merging of forces against a common threat, an old enemy resurfacing." Edward's mind raced. An old enemy. The business world he knew was cutthroat, but this sounded like something far more sinister. He looked at Milana, seeing her not just as his veiled wife, but as a woman deeply involved in a dangerous game. "And your role in this?" "To be a bridge," she said softly, "to ensure the alliance holds, to use whatever skills I possess, to protect what is ours." Edward felt a surge of respect for her. She was not a pawn, but an active participant, burdened with a heavy responsibility. He had underestimated her so completely. Over the following weeks and months, their relationship transformed. The awkward silence of their early days was replaced by shared late-night discussions in the library, poring over complex documents, analyzing threats, and strategizing. Edward learned about the intricacies of the Volkov family's operations, the subtle nuances of power plays he had never noticed before. Milana, in turn, gained a deeper understanding of the Vance Corporation of Edward's vision and the pressures he faced. Their partnership grew organically forged in the crucible of shared challenges. Edward witnessed Milana's sharp intellect in action, her ability to connect disparate pieces of information to anticipate their opponent's moves. He saw her unwavering resolve, her quiet strength in the face of danger. He began to rely on her judgment, trusting her instincts implicitly. One evening, they were working on a particularly sensitive issue involving a potential leak of classified information. The tension in the room was palpable. Edward was frustrated. Hitting a dead end, Milana. After a period of quiet contemplation, spoke up, her voice calm but firm, suggesting a seemingly unconventional approach. Edward was initially skeptical, but the logic behind her reasoning was undeniable. They followed her plan, and it worked brilliantly. That night, after the immediate crisis had passed, Edward looked at Milana, a profound sense of gratitude and awe washing over him. "You saved us, Milana," he said, his voice full of sincerity. Milana met his gaze, and Edward saw a flicker of something in her eyes, not just intelligence, but a hint of vulnerability he hadn't seen before. "We saved us. Edward, we are in this together." That together echoed in Edward's mind. It was no longer just a contractual obligation. It was a bond forged through shared purpose and mutual respect. He found himself opening up to her, sharing his fears, his uncertainties, the weight of his responsibilities. And Milana listened, offering not just strategic advice, but quiet support and understanding. He discovered her subtle humor, her appreciation for literature, her unexpected passion for astronomy. He saw glimpses of the woman behind the veil, and those glimpses were more captivating than any unveiled face could have been. His initial attraction, born of curiosity and the forbidden, had deepened into something far more meaningful. He wasn't just attracted to her mystery, he was falling in love with her mind, her strength, her quiet grace. The transformation in Edward was evident to those around him. The arrogant, often reckless air had become more thoughtful, more focused. He still possessed his sharp business acumen, but there was a new maturity, a depth that hadn't been there before. He spent less time at lavish parties and more time in the library, working alongside Milana. Their physical intimacy remained a delicate, unspoken boundary, a consequence of the veil and the unconventional nature of their relationship's development. Yet, an emotional intimacy blossomed, a connection of minds and spirits that felt more profound than any physical touch. One cold evening, as they sat by the fireplace, the flames casting dancing shadows on the walls, Edward reached out and gently took Milana's gloved hand. "Milana," he said, his voice low and heartfelt. "I know this started as an arrangement, a duty, but it's become something more for me." He paused, searching her eyes, trying to read the emotions hidden behind the lace. I care about you, Milana, deeply." Milana's hand trembled slightly in his. She didn't speak, but her grip tightened on his hand. In that moment, Edward felt a certainty he had never experienced before. Love had found its way into their arranged marriage, not through grand gestures or passionate declarations, but through shared understanding, unwavering trust, and the quiet blossoming of a true partnership. He still didn't know the full story behind the veil, the complete extent of the dangers they faced, but he knew he didn't want to face it alone. He wanted to face it with Milana, his veiled wife, who had shown him the true meaning of strength, intelligence, and connection. Their journey was far from over. The underground war still loomed. But now they were facing it together, a united front forged in the most unexpected of circumstances. Edward looked at Milana, a sense of hope rising within him. The mystery of the veil remained, but the woman behind it was becoming clearer, with each passing day revealing a soul that had captured his heart. Hey everyone, if you're enjoying the content, I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit that like button, drop a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel for more updates. Don't forget to share it with your friends too. Let's spread the word together. Thanks for the support.